what sort of like from what the typical person would view as the war environment, what are the biggest differences now that you're seeing?
Yeah, so the army, as you know, like the conflict in Iraq and Afghanistan are pretty boiled down.
Hmm.
We haven't, I don't think we've had a soldier death, knock on wood, in Iraq and Afghanistan. I think in almost a year.
Yeah.
I'd have to fact check that. I don't know if that's true, but it's been pretty light over there lately.
Hmm.
Obviously, which is obviously a good thing, and
Hmm.
not to say they're not, getting in their fair share of fights and ticks, but um, it's been quieter. So the army's changing, like kind of changing its focus a little bit. We're starting to focus more on our near peer threats again, which
Hmm.
the army's known for, which is what you think of like big, modern, large scale warfare, which is why the army's starting to bring in more armor. So a lot of these including my unit, a lot of these old infantry units are transferring over and becoming armor units. Like my unit's a very new armor unit. We were
Gotcha.
infantry just a few years ago. Right when I joined, we were an infantry unit, and then we changed because now that we're focusing more on fighting near peer threats, China, Russia, Iran, uh, the need for armored warfare is back, and these large scale kinetic conflicts are back. And
Hmm.
I don't think anyone really knows what it would look like today.
Yeah.
Um, exactly. Like you look at the invasion in 2003. Yeah, that was a large scale kinetic invasion, but we didn't have drones. We didn't have the satellite capabilities we have today.
Hmm.
I think it's going to look a lot different in the future because we have those other
Yeah.
domains, as we like to call them, that are really going to transform everything.
Yeah.
It's going to be an
Also,
information fight.
also a lot less initial resistance on the like initial push than you would expect from a near peer, like you were saying. I don't know.
Yep.
Hopefully, knock on wood, we don't end up in any of those anytime soon. I don't.
Yep.
I think everyone is very is on edge. The right word, like kind
Yep.
of nervous. I think nervous, but also at least how I'm feeling, anyways, is like I'm a little like, yeah, but like I don't think anything huge will happen anytime soon. It doesn't seem like to me, anyways, that that's on the near term
Yeah.
horizon.
I think we've hit in the world a really good balance, almost if you will,
Hmm.
where all the we're and a lot of this honestly can boil down to nuclear weapons.
Yeah,
Because
for
nuclear
sure.
weapons exist and because they're now so spread out throughout the world, it's hard to go to war with each other.
Hmm.
Because when you're that leader making like national leader making that decision of do I invade this country,
Hmm.
and you think there's a possibility the world ends because of this, your decision making changes quite a bit. And I think
Yeah,
that's kind of what is helping us out here. That's why I think Iran is much more likely than China or Russia.
yeah.
Because if we go to war with China or Russia, like that's
Nukes are in play for sure.
yeah. With Iran, that's probably the more likely hotspot because they're not quite nuclear capable yet,
Hmm.
and so as far as we know,
Yeah.
and so that's probably the more likely hotspot because we have a very large advantage there. But yeah, I think we're people shouldn't fear the world as much as they do. And that's a hard thing to say.
Hmm.
It's something that boils. Have you ever heard of the information bias?
Um. No.
Yeah, so it's a common thing. So the world, really, if you look at it, is probably safer today than it has been at any point in human history.
Yeah. Yeah. For, I
We've
would agree with
gone
that.
almost 80 years without a major power global war or major
Hmm.
power war,
Hmm.
which is almost unheard of in world history. You look at almost any 20-year period, there's at least two major powers that are going to war with each other, and
Hmm.
hundreds of thousands of people are dying.
Yeah.
We haven't
For
had that
sure.
in 80 since World War II. I mean, it just hasn't existed. I mean, the Cold War obviously existed, but that was
Hmm.
almost entirely proxy. Us going into Vietnam was not a large power war.
No.
Um, so that hasn't existed, and that's remarkable. But
Hmm.
people, what's happening, I think, a lot now is when we talk about the information bias, is we tend to perceive the world as more dangerous than it is because we have access to everything.
Hmm.
Um, there was a lot of people dying back in the day. We just didn't always hear about it. Now we're much better informed, and we're getting all this information. We're like, man, this is jacked up, and it is. Like, there's a lot of
Hmm.
stuff that's not good that's happening in the world, but it's been happening for a long time. We just didn't know about it, and now we do.
Yeah.
So it's a good thing, but it causes an inherent bias where we tend to think things are much worse than they are. I
Yeah.
think.
That makes sense. I think two thoughts. One, what the kind of like the world being in that balance. I think the big powers, like you were saying, are kind of like yeah, we're not gonna do a World War II type thing anymore. Like, I think it's kind of, I don't want to say like an unwritten sort of, but it seems it like the way it seems to me, like is everyone's come to that point where it's like, all right, we're not gonna do this. We're just gonna mess with each other's trade and try and hack each other, and like
Yeah.
that's
Yep.
like the unwritten sort of like, and we might send some carriers like towards you just to like
Yep.
mess with you, but other than that, like we're not gonna do anything. I think that's sort of like it seems like the unwritten sort of rule maybe.
Cool. Yeah.
So I don't know. That's just it just seems like it's like in chess where you both can take the queen, but you both choose not to.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's where we're at. But
Mhm.
there is something that could kind of break that balance, and that's we call a hybrid threat.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically what Russia did in Ukraine. That's kind of
Mm-hmm.
the oddball that you can throw in to kind of break the system. Is since we're so mindful of like accountability of like this person's doing this, if you can deny responsibility in a conflict,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of ruins the system. It's like
Yeah.
Russia essentially invaded Ukraine, and no one did anything about it because they had plausible deniability. They said it wasn't us; it was just Russian separatists who really wanted to take the country back. But
Yeah.
they were funneling
It's like yeah.
soldiers and
Okay.
supplies in hospital.
Yeah.
So
Oh, so it's and another thing, the information bias. I think. Yeah. I mean, I agree pretty much like wholeheartedly. I don't know. Like you hear about so much like crap that goes on now, but it's all one-off stuff that I think
yeah,
for sure that you wouldn't have heard much about like 50 years ago even, um, especially with some of the stuff that, do you know who Annie Jacobson is?
I don't. Not
So
familiar.
she's like an investigative journalist, and she wrote a book on Area 51,
Yeah.
and she wrote a book on the Pentagon and um, like submarine operations during the Cold War.
Mhm.
And there were so many like submarine accidents or like SR-71s that got shot down over Soviet Union, or like all sorts of like little
Yeah.
things that no one ever heard about until now. And it's like we would be hearing about that stuff all the time and be like, why did why did we send this thing there and they ran into this other submarine, and then like then
Yeah.
people would be up in arms about it, and like two sailors died when a submarine accident happened at like this or that, or like all sorts of stuff like that's just for me the easiest example because I read one of her books recently, but
I mean,
like
because every person now is a media source.
mm-hmm,
Like we had one of our drones shot down over Iran,
mm-hmm.
and it sparked a huge international incident. If you look back to like the Cold War, we would have just been like, "Nope, not ours. Prove it."
Yeah, it
But
was
now there's like
it was a
like
weather balloon.
footage of it getting shot down and all that, and it's
Yeah,
like, yeah, it happened.
yeah,
So now that everyone's a media source, it's hard to
yeah,
deny.
like the Roswell crash, um that like kicked off all the Area 51 stuff where they're like, oh,
Yeah,
it's a weather balloon. It's like, yeah, okay, I got a video of it now.
yeah, that could
It's
never
like
happen today.
mm-hmm,
Not a chance. Because someone would be there with their phone and they'd catch
mm-hmm.
it.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's
It's
why we find out now about everything, and we didn't before. It's
yeah,
something that happens 3 times now seems like, man, this is a pattern. This is happening all the time. But really, it happened 3 times, and you heard about it 3 times, and it's kind of a logical fallacy to assume it's common.
mm-hmm. Yeah, that
But
makes
it's a
sense.
bias that we have.
Yeah, it's a weird world we live in now. It's almost too much information, to be honest. Like it's hard to keep track of everything, like what's important, what's not important.